Hey everyone, Sean here, and welcome to another review video. When it comes to TV, movies, streaming series, all that stuff, as always indicated with the red background. I try to do these as whenever I can. Nowadays, it gets a little harder with other distractions and other such things. But I really wanted to take this time today because we are going to be talking about Netflix's One Piece season 2, which is of course the live action series continuing on from season 1. Um, I've let me allow me to preface this that in the very beginning, ever since it was first revealed, I think myself, along with a number of people, detested the whole idea of live action anime because of the reputation it typically got when it comes to beloved anime series becoming a live action thing. It just couldn't be helped because a lot of them were done poorly across, not just anime, but video games and such like that. It had its moments, but a lot of them were slop-ish. And even that word wasn't even used back then until nowadays. But when it first arrived, the whole idea anyway, when it first revealed, especially with that first picture of Luffy's face with the actor and everything, downvotes, especially during its very first reveal. And man, I was definitely one of them. And season 1, when that finally came around, I had to see it, right? And overall, I think my point still stands as it had its problems very apparent, and a lot of the pacing was just super spastic, and it was the enemy, one of the biggest enemies of season 1, which was the pacing, how fast they were going along with the story. But looking back on it and now with retrospect with this one, it does become understandable as to why the pacing was just so intolerable by comparison. And that's a bit of a foreshadow here because when it comes to season 2, though, coming from me, who again detested this whole idea, I think season 2 definitely turned it around so strongly. Season 2, having to watch this back to back all the way through 8 episodes, as it was 8 episodes before, this was such a huge improvement, I think, over season 1. Again, I did not like the whole idea of One Piece being live action in the first place because, I love One Piece. It's my favorite anime series of all time, and manga, of course. Even to this very day, it's my favorite still. I hold on to it so dearly that when people dare to step up to the plate and make it into a live action series, man, what a task, right? But I think season 2 definitely deserves a lot more credit, a lot more praise, as they were able to really improve upon a lot of its problems. And I think the huge problem that season 1 had, like I said, was the pacing. The pacing here is a lot more manageable. And forgive me, I have my notes right here and such. So it was a lot more manageable, and I think it's just because it just so happens that these stories that are featured in season 2 do work in a quicker pace because season 2 features Logtown, Laboon's stuff, the Laboon story, Whiskey Peak, and then of course Little Garden, and then lastly, of course, Drum Island. And so it just so happens that these stories do work in a shorter sort of containment, whereas I think in the East Blue Saga, which is basically like what was season 1, I think a number of those stories required a little more to be stretched out in order for us to get our footing into this world of One Piece and believe these characters to be the establishments, so to say, of what the story is to be unfold for this version of One Piece. and it was expected for us to just believe it in season one with that pacing, and then I just couldn't completely buy it. But it definitely did something to the audience, right? It inspired more people to check out the original story, and it was just a hit all around despite its flaws, right? So I definitely acknowledge that, because it had definitely had its diamonds in the rough, so to say, in season one, but there are a lot less roughs in season two, as they were really able to master this type of pacing now, and they really were able to did a better job cutting out the fat of a lot of these stories, right? Because even Lockdown itself, I can go on quite a bit, but they were able to really contain sort of all the important bits and the set pieces, of course, to tell this part of Lockdown effectively, essentially. Of course, Lockdown is the town where Gold Roger was executed, and tells the story of how Luffy and his friends got through that, pretty effectively for the most part. And then Laboon's story was absolutely told very well, despite, yes, when it comes to the fat trimming out, you do miss out on the gags. I'm going to just spoil that part, but it tells the Laboon part very well, that I was very willing to look over that. And I think for the most part, it is for the best that a lot of these other little bits do get left out, because it otherwise would just make things way more hectic, or it could have been possibly more hectic, than it already seems like, if you're not so used to this type of pacing. But I think they just really did a good job with that sort of practice in this season. Same thing happened with the Whiskey Peak part, Little Garden, and then of course lastly Drum Island. All the set pieces that you do see do happen for the most part, and I just wish though, because yes, the pacing is still pretty brisk, there were still some moments where I wished it had a little more drawing out, so to say. One particular scene that I will talk about for this part right here is Zoro's moment when he got his swords. And so as soon as he touches a certain sword, they didn't really like make it into a moment. It just kind of just happens, and they just kind of went through it. And that's where the remnants of the season one pacing does come in, and that's what I feel, or I was reminded of. And and of course, this is coming from somebody who loves Zoro, so I'm a little more picky about those bits. So I definitely wish that moment had a little more weight to it, a little more time for it to be taken in, right? Because this is a pretty important moment for Zoro, because those swords that he will pick up are going to be with him for a long time. I feel like that should have at least gone a little more to it, but it still did the service. That's the important bit. It happened, and it did the moment pretty respectfully, as that was the sort of model for the most of the other moments too. And so yeah, the pacing was the biggest improvement that I was able to see in season two. Another thing I wanted to mention when it comes to this part, the non-spoiler bit, and I want to talk about the more expansive spoiler discussions and such, either in a later part of this video or in a whole separate video. So yeah, my sort of more quick and dirty parts are, the pacing was really good from season one to going to season two. It was just a lot more well done. Another bit I wanted to mention was the characters. All the new characters were really well done. I think even someone like Smoker was pretty done respectfully. Tashigi probably one of the more annoying bits, but even then, she's a little different from the Tashigi I'm used to in the anime slash manga. But again, like the bits, the important bits of Tashigi is still present, but portrayed a little differently than what I would have expected. Again, like that's like kind of the nature when it comes to these live action sort of conversions, especially if you're looking at a more Western production versus a Japanese production. When it comes to like Japanese characters being converted into more, or converted in the sort of Western scope, things will definitely change one way or the other, and Tashigi kind of loses these nuances that I'm so used to, and yeah, so I think Tashigi is one of the more different characters. If that's I think that's the phrase for it, honestly. But even then, still the sword nerd or sword geek. So I guess that works. But even then, I can tolerate her for the most part. But maybe some people might not. But that's a little more understandable. Uh, Another important bit was the music. Otherwise, I mean, most of the music it's kind of there. It does its service, but it also pays a lot of fan service just with the music alone, especially during the first half. You'll recognize the themes if you watch the anime. And when it comes to an important song that does show up in the episode 2, that honestly blew me away that they actually went for it. And that was pretty cool, as someone who has stuck with One Piece for a long time. So that's all really I'm going to say. The music does play a part, especially during episode 2, but otherwise, when it comes to the soundtrack of itself, it's just there for me. Otherwise, there are some moments where you'll recognize some themes, especially with We Are. I believe it was playing during the early parts. But they do take some liberties of adding certain tracks in there and then giving some characters some themes, kind of, and try to establish kind of their own themes in there with their own tracks. But for the most part, I was a little more indifferent about them. It's kind of cool, but for the most part, it's just kind of there for me. Nothing for me to complain about, but also nothing much for me to praise on it either, other than very key moments of the music in episode 2 and such like that. So I don't want to spoil it too much. Again, if I haven't said already, the characters were, for the most part, were done pretty well. I know Smoker, Tashigi, yes, but I wanted to also mention people like Vivi were pretty well done. Of course, Miss All Sunday, one of the most sort of marketed, I guess you could say, characters from the trailers and such. She was done pretty well. I liked her presence. The actress who played Miss All Sunday was pretty good. Nailed the character pretty well. But I think really like a number of the characters that you don't really expect or think about, like Crocus, Dr. Crocus, and like even Dr. Hirlock, were done very well. And those are just like very side characters for the most part. They have their moments, but they kind of fade to the background. But they had their moments in somebody's lifetime, right? Character-wise. Especially with Dr. Hirlock, it was very well done. Along with, of course, one of the other important characters for season 2, which is Chopper. Chopper was absolutely done well. The voice actors playing Chopper really nailed like those nuances for Chopper. Going from Japanese to here, I think Chopper was very well done here. Very respectfully so. another very well done character for season 2 was Dr. Kureha. I really wanted to mention her because she was such a joy to have on the screen, and wanted to mention specifically. I even have it pulled up here. Katie Sagal. She was the wife, Betty, I think her name was, from Married with Children, classic sitcom from a long time ago with Al, right? And or Peg, excuse me, Peggy, excuse me, Al and Peggy, I think it was, from Married with Children. But Peggy, specifically the actress who played her, Katie Sagal, got the role of Dr. Kureha instead of what was thought to be Jamie Lee Curtis's role. It was such a conversation, right? Because Jamie Lee Curtis definitely has a lot of the looks already for Dr. Kureha, and even Miss Jamie Lee Curtis herself kind of addressed it at some point. But I think for the most part, it was down to just scheduling that ultimately done it, and Katie got the role instead. But all that being said, despite that, Seagal kind of really took it and really nailed it. I really felt like this was a real life Dr. Kureha, like this kind of grumpy but cynical old lady doctor. Now, a lot of these characters, you can't expect for them to do all of the nuances or all of the little gags that these characters came with, but the essence of each of these characters were carried out very well with flying colors. But I think really the characters like Crocus and Hirala, Kureha, of course, it's all funny because they're all like doctors and they're old and were done very, very well. And another set of characters that I wanted to talk about, though, were the Giants. Very cool to really see them kind of carry out their traditions and rules as Giants from Elbaf, excuse me, or Elbaf. Elbaf does get mentioned here, of course. That's inevitable. But yeah, the Giants, the effects and everything, really, really nailed it, right? Done spectacularly for what was offered in the budget, It's not perfect, but they were really able to really get most of it cleaned out and everything, considering that, something from Netflix, you expect, some rough edges, especially with another live action anime that probably won't mention here from Netflix, but the Giants effects were just well done. I hate to repeat it, but that's really the word here. A lot of this stuff was all well done. The use of practical effects versus CGI, or not even versus, it's practical and CGI, were all done pretty damn well. When it comes to the villains, of course, that were thrown in here as well, I think we're also in that same category as the side characters I mentioned, for the most part. I think, honestly, the weakest part, funny enough, was early on, which Buggy and Alvida. Alvida and Buggy felt like they were kind of just there for the sake of driving the plot and being there just for the sake of the set pieces. And I think there are some changes certainly to Alvida, and I think that was for the best. They didn't really play into too much of the side effects of the slip fruit, which it's always been weird to me looking back on it, because in the anime / manga, when Alvida ate the fruit, she somehow got different effects to go along with the fact that, yeah, she's slippery. So they didn't actually put that into the live action. I think, honestly, that's for the best. It works. I think it's just one of those things that were better left out for the most part. now that I kind of see that on the screen. And Buggy is still more or less the same-ish. I felt like Buggy was just trying to be something else, but at this point, trying to have Buggy in the Western's sort of scope, honestly, what else could you do with it, right? I guess. So that's the Buggy we're gonna see every time he makes an appearance, and I guess that's what we're gonna have to accept. So I'm overall just indifferent about this Buggy. I didn't like him too much from season 1, and by this point, I'm just kind of indifferent. I'm just whatever. He's kind of out of the picture at this point, so it's whatever. When it comes to Wapol, though, I think honestly Wapol was done unexpectedly well, like very, very, very nicely, and he nails not only the sort of this obnoxious loudness that you do hear from Wapol in Japanese manga or whatever, but definitely at some points does kind of take it to the next level almost, but not quite. But overall, still done good, like very good. And not to mention the costuming on Wapol was fantastic. I mean, the mouthpiece, the effects when it comes to using his abilities and such. And there are also some liberties taken with Wapol as well. They did some changes with him, but I think it still works within this world of One Piece. And even there was a moment where they even took some very creative liberties with his abilities, and I think that was a very cool thing to see, seeing that, you don't see rather in the anime or manga. I should just say original source, original material. You don't really see that there, but they took that liberty here, and seeing that on the screen was like, wow, that's actually kind of cool, right? And it still makes sense with Wapol's abilities. So that's also something to take into consideration, that the liberties that they took were either done for the best, or they're actually done rather creatively, and that's one of the key points I was able to take away from season 2. So yeah, the characters were very well portrayed for the most part. Not perfectly, for every character, but they all did their thing with flying colors for the most part. But the very key characters, though, for season 2, including Kureha, All Sunday, BB, Crocus, even Dr. Hairlook, of course, so on and so forth. I mean, very, very fantastic. I had a ball with their presence. And even someone like, the Baroque agents, I think were pretty cool to see done in that way, and they were able to nail mostly their, what you expect from the source material. Especially when it comes to someone like Mr. Nine, even. I think the shortest stick was given to someone like Miss Monday. Miss Monday, unfortunately, didn't really get all of that treatment. I felt like she was just kind of pushed to the side, even though in the source material, Miss Monday had her key moment to hold back the frontier agents from getting BB and such, or excuse me, Miss Wednesday, but whatever. Yeah, so you'll find out why there's VB and Miss Wednesday. But anyway, for those who are newer to this One Piece. So anyways, it's honestly hard to not go back and forth with it, but one will understand very easily. So anyways, there are far other important spoilers, really, than anything. But speaking of liberties, they actually were able to cram in a lot of these references, right? So unfortunately, that will fly over a lot of people's heads if you haven't really been with One Piece for a long time. But for someone like me, that was perfect. Every name that they just throw out there, I was able to get, including the Dawn, the Tulip Pirates, all that stuff. Very obscure names too, but even I was able to recognize them. It was, pretty nice that they get some sort of mention or some sort of Easter egg or a cameo or something to that sort. So, a lot of fan service at that too. Like a lot of the respect for One Piece is so clear here. It's very apparent. It's even more than ever. Now I understand that yes, season one had their respect for the material. They tried their best to, give their love and passion or express their love and passion for it. But unfortunately, the pacing, other such problems, kind of made that foggy. But here, just so much clearer, so much polished that you are able to now see how this shines. No pun intended, but so a lot of the set pieces were just so much to treasure. The action scenes were just an experience, very positive that. So really the polish honestly really helps to bring out the positives of season two. The action scenes are better. The sets are done pretty damn well, including Whiskey Peak. Locktown was pretty cool. Even like the newer places were kind of neat. But especially with like Little Garden, they really put out the effort to have this jungle, right? Even though yes, if you look into the behind the scenes, it kind of breaks the illusion. But if you're willing to tunnel vision that, it really, feels like the sort of essence of Little Garden. Drum Island, I would say, unfortunately, a little harder to take in, but it's appropriate because they do come into a time where Drum Kingdom is kind of at its lowest, especially with what happens, right? So Drum Kingdom, or Drum Island, has this gloominess to it, so you're not really able to soak in the Drum Island atmosphere. But although yes, it does have snow, so that's a little harder to take in. It's really just the village and then the Drum Mountain. That's all you can kind of see here. But again, that's the essence of it. That's the main set pieces for it. So honestly, that's more of like the fat trimming that they did for it. And, it works. I think it works. But if you're looking for anything visually impressive for Drum Island, not so much for the most part, unless you get to the end of it. That's really honestly like my quick and dirty of it, of my thoughts on season two. I think it was just so well done, and by comparison to season one, I can go on about like all the notices and notes and the key changes and just a lot of the notes, right? But for the most part, the action scenes were great. The characters were portrayed so respectfully and well done, and any of the changes that you see in the in this season was done either like it was for the best, or they done it really creatively. Really, you will miss out on some things unfortunately from season two. That's kind of inevitable, I guess. But again, at least it was able to make the story still work, even with some absences of some things. There's really only, honestly, like very picky things I have throughout all of the episodes that do add up to one negative, really. And it's like really these just small little picky things. I don't really have outright other cons or negatives for season two. It's just, yeah, again, it's just all this little parts, and I kind of and the very few moments of the pacing where it starts to sort of show the remnants of season 1. But otherwise, so much good to be had in season 2 that I'm willing to overlook most of the negatives of season 2. So with all that said, gosh, like it was, it's very night and day. So initially I gave season 1 a 6 out of 10, and I think honestly that's like right around the same-ish. Like if I'm the most generous with season 1, at most it's a 7 out of 10. But even then, it has its inherent problems, are very apparent, really. But season 2, so much better. So I'm gonna honestly give this one like an 8.5 out of 10. Again, it's just all these little things that I wished were addressed, but it's kind of hard to explain without really going into spoiler territory and such. But it's an 8.5 out of 10. Very noticeable improvement. It's just a hair away from like for me to give it a 9. I know like a number of places have been giving it like a 9 or 10 even out of 10, and I think honestly that I can kind of understand it, because as soon as I finished watching it, I was like, damn, honestly. But some things are holding me back from being a complete 9. That's why for me I would give it that 8.5 out of 10. But again, this is all coming from me who really detested the idea of like live action anime or live action One Piece specifically. But now I'm on board with it. And season 3 is already coming. Like they're already filming it or whatever. It's already coming. And I think next year they are going to do all of Alabasta. It's all gonna be all Alabasta in this bit here for season 3. So that's honestly going to definitely change up the experience, because season 1, it felt very the pace was very bad by comparison, because they wanted to cover these sagas so fast, whereas I felt like season 2, not as much. That's why the pacing was a lot more tolerable. But even then they were able to cut out the right amount of fat and tell the story very effectively and much better here in season 2. But hopefully, so that means that season 3, because they're just telling all of Alabasta in season 3, hopefully they tell Alabasta very well, because Alabasta, that's my favorite arc, honestly. That, especially with Mr. Zero and everything, he's my favorite guy when it comes to villains. Still, he's the man, right? He's the dude. You'll especially know why once, especially for the live action fans, once you really get to know him. Or if you want to get into the original material, then sure, you can find out that way too. Well, man, Alabasta is my jam. So hopefully they do that justice. As season 2, the story told here was, I think, for the most part, done justice. Especially with Chopper's backstory, Laboon's story, the Logtown stuff was pretty good. Honestly, probably sadly, I'd say that's the weakest part to me anyway. But everything else is so good. It's like whatever at this point. So 8.5 out of 10. That's my thoughts on it without spoiling things. I'll probably separate the video at this point and give the spoiler discussion to a separate video. So thanks. And if you have any comments of One Piece Season 2, I'd like to read them down below. What's your score and everything, if you guys liked it or not. I can go on, honestly, but I'm trying to contain it, and I'm really stretching out already. So anyways, thanks, and hope to see you all in the next video. But before that, like, subscribe, comment, really helps out. So anyways, thanks, and hope to see you all in the spoiler discussion. Sean out.